Getting paid to lay pipe is usually the sort of job reserved for the likes of Deuce Bigelow and other, entertainment figures. Well, what if I told you that you too could get paid to lay pipe without having to work the corner? Well, let me introduce you to plumbing. Now, plumbing is by no means a glamorous job, but without it, we'd be up shit creek. Quite literally, all the creeks would just be full of shit. But plumbing is just one of those jobs that these days is extremely necessary. And just like every other high demand job in 2025, like fake teeth, hair transplants, and supercar rentals, there's a lot of money to be made in plumbing. But unfortunately, there's a bit of a hierarchy you gotta make your way up. So in this video, we'll be going through everything that you need to know about being a plumber, how to make money, where to start, and most importantly, what to avoid. Anyway, that's enough waffle, let's get into it. Now, as with any trade, and as I mentioned in my tradies and apprentices video, the first step for any trade, especially in Australia, is an apprenticeship. And the plumbing apprenticeship is pretty much the same as the rest of them. You get paid 4 shillings an hour to basically be a glorified labourer and spend all day on the misery stick. And that's the unfortunate part of plumbing. While most trades are sort of above ground, plumbing is one of the few where you spend a lot of time below ground, and it's usually the apprentice that gets the lucky job of digging all the holes. But one of my favourite plumbing apprentice stories comes from my cameraman Stuart. He once had an apprentice on his job site whose entire job was just to follow the more experienced guys around, and whenever they got PVC cement or silicone on their fingers, he was the rag. And they used to make the guy go home and wash his uniform every day after work so that the next day they'd have a clean rag to wipe their hands on. But you see, if you want to get through your apprenticeship, you gotta be smart, and the key to that is to go missing. Now, this is a lot easier said than done, and is way easier to get away with on big jobs. But if you're an apprentice for a small company, you gotta be a lot more tactical with it. So if you get sent to Bunnings to look for something like a left-handed toilet plunger, make sure to take your time, and don't forget to maximize time spent in the portable sauna. Anyway, that's enough about apprenticeships. I've already done a whole video on them. Let's move on to the most important part about plumbing. Shit. Now, it's no secret that plumbers come across poo quite often, but there's a golden rule to this. Shit always runs downhill. So as long as you're upstream from the poo source, you should be alright. Unless, of course, the pipe full of fecal matter is pressurized for some reason, then no one is safe. But the shit runs downhill rule is the most important one by far. But it's not just shit that runs downhill, piss does as well. My friend Stuart was doing some work under a pipe, which unbeknownst to him was hooked up to a toilet that wasn't hooked up to anything. So when one of the plasterers used this toilet to take a piss, Stuart was lucky enough to receive the good old golden shower. Now, of course, one of these hats would have mitigated the situation, but what was done, and Stuart had a very nice conversation with the man afterwards. Anyway, if you find yourself dealing with poo, there's a few easy ways to get out of it. First, of course, is try and make the apprentice deal with it. Now, if that doesn't work, the next step, of course, is to take refuge in the portable sauna and hope that somebody else deals with it before you have to come out. There's also the option of a strategically timed smoko or lunch break, and of course, if you're on a big job site, there's just the option to go missing. Now, these next two have already been covered in my tradies video, but that was 2 years ago, so I think it's long enough to be able to revisit these. And that's simply because plumbers are the best when it comes to these two things. And first up, of course, is overquoting for a job. Now, of course, we all know there's call-out fees, after-hours fees, weekend and public holiday fees, it's close to lunchtime, so I'll chuck on an extra $100 to pay for it fees, and of course the spectators fee. And while some of these may be slightly ethically questionable, you can sort of get away with it across the board when it comes to any trade. But where plumbers sort of have the upper hand is that they can just charge whatever they want on the spot, because plumbing work can quite often be an emergency, and this is where the money's made. Now, the only other trade really in this category has to be electrical. I mean, I've never heard anyone have to pour an emergency concrete slab, and if you have problems with your carpentry, a lot of the time, since it's all in the walls, you won't find out till the house falls down, and then it's too late anyway. But in the trade world, the word emergency loosely translates to profit. Then of course, you also have the option of the can't be bothered markup, where you inflate the price by usually at least double, hoping that the client turns down your offer. But on the odd occasion they do say yes, you'll be able to buy that brand new Ford Ranger Raptor straight off the dealership floor with cash in no time. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, I've personally seen some crazy plumbing quotes. Leaky tap that costs $20 to fix? Nope. The plumbing under your house has been leaking for the last 15 years, and if you don't do anything about it within the next month, your house is going to be swallowed by a sinkhole. And of course, this would usually be a knockdown rebuild job, but luckily, since some junkie broke into my work car last week and stole all of my tools, I'm gonna need some quick cash and I'll do it for only 50 grand. You see, it's that easy. Simple supply and demand. And while this is a life hack to printing money, unfortunately, there is a risk and reward factor to this. And while the reward may be financial freedom and an entire fleet of Ranger Raptor company cars, more often the risk far outweighs the reward. And the most common punishment that these plumbers see is of course a current affair, Australia's most trusted news source. Now of course you can go around quoting the elderly 20 grand to change a tap as much as you want, but when you eventually get caught, more often than not you'll have Tracy Grimshaw and her goons chasing after you with a news camera and a microphone. You won't see them coming, but they'll just pounce out of nowhere and catch you red-handed. Now one of the most famous stories, and one that I covered in my old video ages ago, was this plumber right here, who was pulling every trick in the book and wasn't exactly subtle about it. And a long story short, he had to go to court, lost his plumbing license, and most recently he's been in hot water again, having to go to court after punching on with his neighbour after a dispute over sewage. But there is some new players on the block. If you know, you know, but a current affair's already gone after him at least 2 times, and it seems that these guys have basically perfected the art. Anyway, what we've learned here is to use your common sense, don't pull the 20k job card on every job, and if you do it in moderation, you might just get away with it. And even if you do become a current affair news story and lose your plumbing license, it doesn't seem to have stopped anyone in the past anyway. And of course I've got to give my favourite plumber a shout out, the Sydney plumber chick. She has like 300,000 followers for a reason, and that is because she's good at plumbing. And if she slid me an invoice for $500,000, I'd probably just pay it anyway. So next time a junkie breaks into your house and rips all the copper piping out of your walls, you guys know who to call, and tell her that I sent you. Anyway, moving on. The next most important part of plumbing is of course the plumbing vehicle. Now just like any trades, if you play these cards right, you can use this car as a complete tax write-off, which is why all the plumbing vehicles that you see on the current affair exposés are either Rams, Ranger Raptors, or a 79 series fully kitted out to go off-roading, even though it never leaves the pavement. And that's because all of this is completely tax deductible. It's a work vehicle. But if you haven't been able to implement the elderly tax recently because they've all died of old age or something, there's plenty of other plumbing vehicles that you can choose from. And of course, it's no secret that the best of the bunch is the Ford AU Falcon. Business in the front, party in the back, enough room in the tray to fit long lengths of PVC or all the copper that you've stolen off various job sites. The AU Falcon Ute is just perfectly fit for the job, in the same way that the AU Falcon Wagon is the perfect car for painters. But if you don't want to have to deal with women chasing you down the road all day long while you're just trying to get to work, pretty much any other dual cab ute or van will do the same job. But just remember, you can spend as much as you want or as little as you want on a plumbing vehicle, and as long as you have a roof rack and a conduit carrier on the top, it is entirely tax deductible, so use that information wisely. Anyway, now it's time to get into some of the best parts of being a plumber. And first up, of course, we have collecting scrap copper. Whether it's updating an old plumbing system, removing old water lines, or just pinching it from anywhere that you can get your hands on it, scrap copper is a plumber's best friend. And 90% of plumbers will have their own scrap copper collection somewhere. Now for some of you out there watching, you may be wondering what's so important about scrap copper. And that of course is the fact that it's worth money. If you pinch a few grams of copper over the course of a few months or even a few years, and then sell it off at the scrapyard for upwards of $10 a kilo, depending on how much you manage to get your hands on, you could be in for a big payday. And any plumber out there will know that the absolute holy grail of scrap copper has to be old hot water systems. Back in the day when they used to make the barrel for these hot water systems out of copper, you could easily get a couple $100 just by taking one of them to the scrapyard. But unfortunately these days they don't really use copper anymore because A, it's expensive, and B, all the junkies were nicking them. So the best way to find these old hot water systems is when someone calls you up for a job to replace their old 25-year-old hot water system that just shat the bed, and boom, payday. You can even offer them a free disposal. And then of course you're going to reinvest your winnings back into the plumber's PlayStation, and that's where the real money is made. Now look, scrap copper is all fun and games. There's a reason why some junkies do this as a full-time job, by breaking into job sites, ripping all the copper out of the walls and cashing it in for meth. I remember my friend's old warehouse had copper piping on all of the outside taps, and then one day he turned up to his warehouse to find out that someone had taken an angle grinder to all the taps in question, causing thousands of dollars of damage for about $300 worth of copper, if that. So I'm sure all the plumbers love it when they get to go back to a job site that they just installed all the copper piping in, just to redo it all again, because Jimmy the junkie stole it all. Anyway, let's move on. Now the last thing I want to talk about today is of course the U-bend lucky dip. Now we've all heard stories of doctors talking about patients who come in with something jammed up their posterior that not even King Arthur could pull out. And you always think, how the fuck and why the fuck did that even end up there in the first place? Well, plumbing is the same, but instead of up your bum, it's threads down the toilet. What's the most common thing that you call a plumber for? A blocked toilet. Well, I had a quick read through this thread on the r/plumbing Reddit page, and I don't think I really need to elaborate, but I'm sure you guys can imagine exactly what this was filled with. The blurred photo on the original post says enough, but if you're watching this video and you're a plumber, leave a comment down below of the most outrageous thing that you've ever pulled out of a toilet for my enjoyment and everyone else's. Anyway, I think I've covered everything that I need to in this video, so if you've enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy one of these as well, and don't forget to do your boy a favor and press the like and subscribe button. Anyway, that's all. I'll see you guys in the next one.